Hello, hello, hello. It's understandable that it was missed because what they're trying to do is oh, that's what can I talk? Oh yeah. Yes, we're recording.
Okay.
So good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I'm Jonathan Fishman. I'm a principal and founder here at LeanLaw. And we're excited today to have Loren Fogelman with us. I'm not going to try to represent her background well because I think she's very capable of doing that. But what we liked when we were out hunting for our next topic was we wanted to find someone who we thought was smart, understood how to develop business in a practical way, and knew something about accounting. And we stumbled upon Loren, and we've been so fortunate because her niche is helping people who are running accounting practices grow their businesses. And if I misrepresent that, Loren, please step in. So as a starting place, I just want her to introduce herself and talk about it. In the chat, before she gets going, I have already sent out a slew of links to some really important things that I expect all of you to look at. Loren's website, Loren's ebook, and specifically a blog post that she wrote relative to QuickBooks Live, because we're going to talk a little bit about that later, and I wanted to have it all at your fingertips. In addition to that, when she's done, I'll introduce LeanLaw a little bit more as well. So Loren, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. First of all, Jonathan, really appreciate the reach out and the conversations that we've had being able to lead up to this. What I would say is that what you and I are doing today is actually an example of how the people joining us can develop their niche as well with attorneys. So we're actually doing something that will be part of what I'll dig into a little bit further today. But a little bit about me. Let me get my accent out of the way. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I don't know how many of you guessed that. If anybody gets that ahead of time, please let me know in the chat. I would love to know. And then I grew up in Miami, Florida. I've been in, oh, okay, Deb's a fellow New Yorker. Excellent. Anyway, I grew up in Miami, Florida, moved to Oregon. We've been here for 22 years, and tomorrow's our last day. We are now moving to California because I crave a warm winter. So somehow I've hit all four corners of the U.S. Unintentionally during my lifetime. And I will say that about me, I am a sports psychologist turned business coach.
I didn't know that.
What I have found is that the things that help an athlete really become elite and be able to claim that #1 spot and sustain that high level of performance applies to accounting professionals who are highly motivated to deeply serve their clients too. It isn't just about the strategy and the tactical steps, it's really about the mindset. And the way that I got to be doing this was after about 5 years or so of doing a virtual business with sports psychology, I realized that it wasn't quite fulfilling me in the way that I wanted to be able to move forward, and started exploring for that next best move. And that's when I became aware of business coaching. And from there, started to really develop my own niche of working with accounting professionals. My particular thing is I want to help you double your income working half the time. That's really what my whole purpose is for working with accounting professionals, because you make such a difference for people's lives and their businesses, and you deserve to earn the rewards, and that there's ways to do it without having to really sacrifice other parts of your life. And I will say that those things that help you to really double your income working half the time, a lot of times are very counterintuitive to what everybody else is doing. One of the things is looking at your pricing strategy. It's looking at your mindset. And there's actually 5 things that I look at when I'm working with something doing that is figuring out what your strengths are. So what you do better than anybody else that's also giving the same result to their clients. Looking at the fact that when you can separate your fees from time, then you start to really position yourself on value as opposed to how much time you're selling someone, which isn't the most important thing. Recognizing that success is messy. If you were to get off this call and go ahead and double or triple your rates, what thought comes up for you right now? The 4th step that I look at is how to be able to stand out as the go-to expert, which is part of what we're really digging into today, is position yourself as that go-to expert for attorneys and the legal profession. And then the 5th part is about solving a need. So what is it that attorneys need so desperately, and you are the one that can help them solve that problem? So those are some of the things that I look at when I'm working with accounting professionals on how to really take their business to the next level in a way that supports them instead of drains the life out of them.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in and just talk a little bit about the context of today. My job is really to try to steward the conversation. Loren certainly is the expert. It's casual. You can see us talking to you through the panel. You can see I'm running some things. So if you see me look this way, it's because I have multiple screens and I've got a lot going on over here to facilitate things. I really encourage everyone to ask questions. What we're not going to do today, and if someone is disappointed or frustrated by this, is demo LeanLaw or talk about the workflows of LeanLaw. This is about learning how to build your practice from a business standpoint. We do a monthly meetup with LeanLaw, and those tend to steward more towards the mechanics of LeanLaw. We did one just it's the first Tuesday of the month. Reach out to me, and we'll either join our LeanLaw Accounting Pro or reach out to me, and I'll let you know. They're free and they're very casual. Last month we did an expense workflow. Next month we're doing one on reporting. So we're drilling down into the reporting of how LeanLaw as a tool working with QuickBooks Online can not just give you the basics of reporting, but give you better insights as attorneys are managing their practices, and how you can, as the accounting pro, take that data, package it, and deliver it to your client to add value. So I want to just a little bit speak to LeanLaw. We're a software as a service company. We're based in Boise, Idaho. Our position in the world is that we are a timekeeping and invoicing platform for small law. Small law is defined typically as 20 attorneys or less. We are niched in the space of invoicing only. So when you think at the landscape of legal practice management tools or legal tools, you have practice management. The biggest player on that side is Clio. And then we aspire to be the biggest player in the non-practice management, which would be invoicing only. Our positioning is that we do QuickBooks integration better than anyone in the market. And we don't think about that integration as a feature. We think it as part of the workflow. So our job is to look at the functionality of QuickBooks and extend it into the world of LeanLaw, such that a lawyer can work in a platform that is intuitive to them, that makes sense on a day in, day out basis. But the accounting community can work in a tool that's native to them, QuickBooks Online. And at the end of the day, because QuickBooks is the source of truth, your data is accurate, and we've mitigated manual work. So that's where we fit in the world. So I want to jump ahead. I had these questions that I queued up for Loren earlier, but I'm going to ask one question because you said that, something in your intro that struck me. We're going to use the word value a lot. And so my question is, how do you define value? Like just from the get-go, so we have that understanding of vernacular. Because when we say, you know, we're going to talk a lot about your value, and your value is important, and you've got to sell your value. What's value? What does that mean?
Actually, value is subjective. So let me give you an example, because what we think it is and what it really is are two different things. I have this cup of water here, and if you're listening to me speak at Scaling New Heights later on this year, and you get thirsty, and this cup of water is for sale, how much would you pay for that cup of water?
I don't know. Buck?
Okay, yeah, most likely $1. If you were at an airport, you might pay $3 for the same cup of water, but you would maybe pay $1. Now, if you were in the desert in August for 3 days, scorching hot, you haven't had anything to eat or drink, and all of a sudden I show up with this same cup of water, nothing's changed, the same amount of ounces inside and everything like that, and you know that you have only limited time left before you just can't go any further. How much would that same cup of water be then?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Whatever I have in my pocket to give you, plus my
that's it.
plus your compassion and empathy and everything else to try to sell you to survive. I mean, there's no way to. I don't have a dollar amount because it's about life or death in that moment.
Right. So basically, it shows you that value is subjective depending on someone's circumstances of what they want, what they need, and what they desire. And your wants, needs, and desires for that cup of water in a conference is going to be very different than when you're literally dying of thirst after 3 days of wandering out in the desert and you don't even know if you're close to making it out or not. And the part is that it's not about how I view my value, it's about how you view my value.
Right.
So it's subjective. That means that it's fluid. It's also not what I think my service is worth. It's what someone who's speaking with me thinks my services are worth to them.
But isn't there a component of what you think your services are worth? And doesn't that play a little into pricing?
Oh, absolutely. I need, so go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. With that, I absolutely agree. I mean, I need to decide what my bottom line is. You know, one is the lowest rate maybe that I'm going to be okay working with someone, and that with value, your pricing is a reflection of your self-worth.
Yeah, and that's the point that I was getting at, is that I think that if you really appreciate what you're selling and you value yourself, there's nothing wrong with pricing it where it is. And the truth is, if you get that combination right, people will pay for it, and they'll pay for it gladly. And I think too many times we think about that, and you know, the big theme is value-based pricing. And I'm going to dive into this question. You know, QuickBooks came out with QuickBooks Live, and I think it spoke a lot to it. And I want, Loren, you to sort of, you know, speak to that as, you know, you saw it as an opportunity. Why was QuickBooks Live an opportunity? Because to me, it spoke to the changing nature of one function of accounting, which is reconciliation. So why did you see that as an opportunity versus a threat to the accounting community?
Because when you are charging by the hour or focusing on the amount of transactions you're doing each month, how many bank accounts you're reconciling, looking at how much time you're spending on someone's accounts, then you become a commodity. You're trading dollars for hours. Nobody can separate you from anybody else that's offering a similar service. As a result, it's a disservice to everything that you actually know and do, because you're focusing on the doing as opposed to your knowledge. And the most valuable thing that you bring to your clients is what's called your intellectual property. It's what you know and hear. Therefore, I love the fact that QuickBooks Live is really pushing the envelope. And when you really look at what they're doing, they're not looking to oust bookkeepers from doing the commodity-based work, the reconciliation or anything like that. What they're looking at is that they want to be able to lead more people that aren't yet working with an accountant to a pro advisor. That's really the premise of what they're doing. But the part that I really love about this is that this is now going to push accounting professionals to raise the standard of their work and to really own their worth, and being able to get a jump on niching and developing your specialty and having it focus on value is the best thing you can absolutely do for your business. And it's probably the most scary thing you can do for your business also. But as a result of that, once you start to niche, especially with attorneys don't want to work with QuickBooks Live.
Yeah, they don't. I was just gonna get to that point, because, you know, so all I do every day is talk to attorneys and accountants or accounting community, like all day long, and sometimes both at the same time. And you know, so I want to shift the conversation. So let's talk about how we niche and what the tactics and strategies are. But the thing I think is interesting is that attorneys see themselves as upmarket professional people. That's who they are. I mean, some of them charge upwards to $1,000 an hour, and a low rate for an hourly attorney is $125. That is like bottom line, you know, work. And most averages are in the $300 to $400 an hour range. And it changes from cities. You know, in Los Angeles and San Francisco, it's higher. In rural areas, it's less. And what I found success in attorneys, and I just play this point out, is that by me being their equal, I don't come in them as a vendor or subservient. I come into many of my conversations with attorneys and say, you have a problem. And I can see the problem and I can articulate the problem. And because I'm speaking to them on equal terms, it begins to create this really functional dialogue between the two of them. And that's not a commodity. And I think that goes the same with the accounting community, is when you're addressing attorneys, the first thing that you have to recognize is that they are upmarket professional folks. So let's shift the conversation and talk about niching, and specifically to attorneys. So, you know, niching is really scary, because at some fundamental level, you're saying no to some other business. I just had a conversation with someone yesterday, and she's got all these clients, and, you know, for her to really niche, she'd have to abandon those clients to a certain degree, which is abandoning income. So what is the psyche as a starting place for someone to make that decision? I mean, you can think about it in a logical way, but how do you help people get into the decision process of saying, okay, I'm going to niche? And what are some of the first things they have to consider?
Sure. I believe that the first thing is about awareness. They are aware that to some degree how their business is working right now is not the most effective way for them to be operating and growing their firm. That is the first thing, is that there's something that needs to be agitating them. Because the majority of people that are looking to niche are going to be open to the conversation for one of two reasons. Either because there's a problem and being a generalist isn't working for them, or they want to achieve something. They want to be able to be a specialist and recognize what they offer. However, they just don't know how to do it. The majority of people who are looking to niche, then, I would say 75% probably have some issue of their business isn't as lucrative as it could be, and that they believe that solving that problem is by focusing on a niche with the attorney profession. That's the first thing. So you have to have awareness. And then one of the things that you want to do next is be able to do what I call reverse engineering. So now that you have that awareness that you want to have a niche, what does the end result look like? Because I want to start with the end in mind, from a neuroscience point of view, when you start with the end in mind, you are taking a different path and trajectory than when you're starting from the beginning and you're going from where you are now to where you want to be. I want to know, what exactly would you like your practice to look like so that it supports your lifestyle, instead of really, once again, having you make compromises in order to have a business? So let's go ahead and figure that out. Once we figure that out, then it's knowing, where are you the specialist? What is it that you do better than anybody else that attorneys highly value? And let's go ahead and figure out how to bring more of that into your business, because it's not just about the compliance part, it's about becoming a trusted advisor and gaining that expert status. The other part is recognizing that not all attorneys are going to be ideal clients for you. A lot of times when you're looking at developing that niche, you think about demographics. So where are they located? They're all going to have higher level education, but what's their income? Are they single? Are they married? What might be their spiritual, political preferences, and all those other things. And I don't think that that matters quite as much as psychographics. Psychographics are more of, what are the qualities and characteristics of your ideal client? And let's lead with that, and then make the demographics secondary. And then the last thing to recognize is that you actually don't want to stop working with all of your current clients as you develop a niche, because what's going to happen is, if you do that so quickly, the switch, then you're going to end up having your own cash imperative.
Yeah, sure, there's cash flow issues. Lorette Clash, hello Lorette, and thank you for being here, made a comment, and I think it's a catalyst to this, why niche. She said, do you agree that bookkeepers are becoming consultants for onboarding and maintenance of a business workflow? And I think that's another reason that's driving people to niche. And what I mean by that is, every time that we interact in an onboarding, and remember, there's 3 reasons someone's asking for your services. There's a new entity, a new law firm. They have someone right now who's bad, and it's not working, so you've got to fix it. Or third, they want to outsource it. They're doing something inside the firm, and they want to that's only 3 reasons why people engage a new accounting entity. In all 3 entities, the first part of the process is saying, what are the workflows? And tied very tight to that are, what are the tools? And so if you think about a reason to niche, and a catalyst for it is that you can't successfully go into multiple markets and think that you know all the right workflows and tools. A retail business is entirely different than a professional services business. So that's the first point. So yes, Lorette, I totally agree with that. That's what we're saying, and we're advocates for this because we look at LeanLaw as a component of this workflow, where then you can tie in HubDoc and other tools related to that that creates this flow for the law firm. The other comment I want to make about when you're thinking about niching into law specifically is that it's not just about who this attorney is in the comments that you said, but that's important. There's also niches of law. So you might have not just size of firm, like there's 4 basic sizes of firm. There's small, there's a solo, a single attorney. There's micro, which tends to be 2 to 3 partners. There's small law firms that tends to be like up to about 7 or 8. And then there is also a principal-driven law firm. One person, man or woman, owns the firm, and they have a bunch of people working for them. And each size of firm has its own characteristics of what it needs. So size is a really important driver in considering niche. The other aspect is the discipline of law. What practice do they do? A family law practice is very different than a litigation practice, which is different than a personal injury or retail practice. And it's important that you not necessarily say, I only do family law, although that segment is big enough, but that when you're looking at niching in law, that you think about that, because each of those firms and their disciplines have specificity as to how the accounting happens, cash flow needs, tax issues and different consequences. So when I think about niching, it's not just, okay, I want to do law and I need to know trust accounting. It's, hey, what size of firm and what are the niches that I tend to be good in? And the reason being for this is that when you get that right and you have that first conversation with that client, you're speaking the same language.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes the conversation upmarket. You're not talking about the commoditization of, we'll do your reconciliation, accounts payables and receivables. You're talking about, hey, I understand the cash flow issues of a personal injury firm, and here's how we can help manage and monitor that. Things of that nature, or maybe there's collections issues where they are. So, so we talked about some of the things of why to niche. We talked about value. Help me understand, where does someone start? And what are some of the best practices to move forward in this? So we sort of said pick your person, but that's just, okay, I want to go do with small law firms and doing personal injury. Like, where do you start? How do you get going?
You have to be able to get out there and stop hiding behind your computer, is how I look at it. So a lot of times what happens as accounting professionals is that you're working in your business and you're doing the day-to-day stuff for your clients, which is very, very understandable. But there's not as much time set aside or devoted to working on your business, which helps you actually develop that niche. The bottom line that I see is that you have to figure out where they are and go where they are rather than expecting them to come to you, especially in the beginning. Now, Intuit actually...
Hold on a second. I want to ask a question on that.
Sure.
How do you figure out where they are? What does that mean, where they are?
When you're looking at where they are, that's a little bit of research. And research is really looking at where they are, and I will actually answer that. Before I answer that, I just want to let you know that Intuit did some research, and they found that when you niche, 64% of your clients are going to come from referrals. So in the long run, it'll be very, very easy where you don't have to do as much networking or marketing. But in the beginning, you absolutely need to put in some time, energy, effort to be able to get that going. So the ways to be able to look at where they are is by first, how do you get content out there? Is it finding out what are the blogs that they might be reading or the industry magazines? And then looking at how you might be able to be a contributor in those particular things if you actually like writing. Another thing is looking at where do they spend time on social media? The majority of attorneys are going to most likely be on LinkedIn. So when you're on LinkedIn, and this isn't spending hours and hours on it, it's maybe carving out 10 to 15 minutes every day of developing your network, because LinkedIn is a search engine. You can put in the search function attorneys, and you can even put attorneys for a particular region, and LinkedIn will go ahead and give you who those people are, and you can actually reach out to them or maybe have a connection, and that connection can make an introduction for the two of you. The other thing you want to do from a social media point of view on LinkedIn is schedule posts so that you're putting content out there on a regular basis. It could be your information, it could be videos, or maybe you found some articles of interest for attorneys and you're sharing those. And the best place to really start to get attention in LinkedIn is to find the specific groups that LinkedIn has for attorneys and start to join a couple of those groups and participate in those conversations when the topics are relevant. And then later on, you can actually start conversations as well. So the first one is looking at putting content out there with articles. Second one is social media. The third thing you want to look at doing is speaking. And not speaking to other accounting professionals. You want to find the events and the conferences that attorneys attend, and how can you be a speaker there? And speaking can either be in person or can be virtual, like Jonathan and I are doing right now. So if they're going to be going to a conference, can you be a speaker there? Or if you don't want to speak, you can actually just go as an attendee, and you will be in a sea of ideal clients, and you'll probably be the only accounting professional there. And you can actually come home with new business because you showed up where they are and you got to talk to them face to face out of the office in a more relaxed situation. But aside from the conferences and doing webinars like Jonathan and I are doing, there's podcasts also that are specifically for attorneys. And you can actually be a speaker on a podcast. And the last thing to look at as far as speaking is you could host a lunch and learn and have it be something that would be specific for attorneys that they're interested in. And that would be a way to really develop your niche locally also. The fourth step is to look at resources. With resources, it's a little bit of a longer game, and you might not be there yet, but how can you maybe develop a checklist that would be interesting for them, or host your own webinar, or have an ebook, and be able to give that to them in exchange for their email address. And by doing that, you're giving them information that they really want and need. And then with the email, you get to start to develop a relationship with them, because they're not necessarily going to find you and then want to become a client a lot of times. Some of them might want to just get to know you first and see what you have to offer and how you're different from other people. And then the fifth step is refining your elevator speech, because networking is not comfortable. It's something that most people do naturally. And with your elevator speech, people want to know what to say. Well, you can say what you want in 3 sentences. Basically, you want to think about when you go to a networking event where there's other attorneys, what is their biggest problem that you tend to solve? And think about that one biggest problem that they might be having. Because they have that problem, what is the impact for them? How does that affect their decision-making, cash flow, other things, financial, being able to maybe plan for growth or additional software? So what's the impact of not having a really good handle or accurate information about their finances? And then the third part is the solution. And as a result of having accurate reporting and actually really understanding what the reports mean, or being able to forecast, how does that help them to move forward and make things easier for them? So those are the 5 things that I would look at for starting to develop a niche: is developing content, spending some time on a consistent basis on social media, looking at speaking, whether it's in person or virtually in some way, developing some resources for them as easy as a 5-point checklist, and then looking at how you position yourself when you are networking with that 3-sentence elevator speech. So those are ways to be able to kind of begin getting out there, Jonathan.
And I want to kind of speak even a step before that.
Please.
Because I know that, I'm looking at some of the people online, and I've talked to them about this specifically, and everything you described is right, but it's hard, right, to write and to speak, and it's out of their comfort zone. And I think what you said, which was really important, which is referrals are going to drive your business. And some of you, have the ability to build a brand online and to do all this. Others, it's just a reality that you're not. And I think at some level you accept that. So then you can say, well, how you start niching, and in networking into that bar association and offering value. We talked to them and come back to this biggest problem question. The second thing is your chamber of commerce. You have to remember that lawyers, in many instances, are out referring and networking and trying to drum up their own business. So finding the places that they might be networking, the chamber of commerce, different other business social clubs, networking groups. As you come into that with that clear elevator pitch, understanding your value and saying that I niche, you're introduced as the legal accounting expert, which fundamentally will create that referral saying, oh, you should talk to, Loren. All she does is work with attorneys. So there is this social media content marketing strategy, which is very effective, and it's a long tail, meaning it takes a long time to develop that. But there are things you can do locally in your neighborhood with your community that allow you to get in front of people who know lawyers or lawyers themselves and start to have a question. So let's go back to that biggest problem, because I want to speak to that. This is what is that biggest problem? And I'm curious to ask the group through chat or through question what you guys perceive as the biggest problem that lawyers have. I know it's going to be trust accounting. And so understanding that, trust accounting, the vernacular of it, how it works, how it's different for contingency practices. Contingency simply means, hey, the attorney was doing something on spec, meaning a personal injury. I'll take the case for free, and upon settlement, I'll typically take 30%. That type of trust is very different. Basically, there's no money, and then all of a sudden we get a settlement, and we have to disperse it, versus more of the conventional retainer trust model, which is I take some money in, I can then use it up, I may take some more money. So understanding trust and the function of trust is one of the biggest problems for sure for attorneys. The second, and Linda mentioned it, is proper workflows. They are so clumsy in how they're operating in their firm, so they're looking to say, how do I modernize? Remember, I said there's three things. I'm either creating a firm, which means there's workflows needed. I've got something going wrong, I need it fixed, which is typically derived from workflows, or I'm outsourcing, which means I've got to create a new workflow from that. So that's the second big problem that I see with attorneys. And the third is collections. And they may not be able to articulate or represent that, but that's a big piece of how they not only getting their invoices out, but actually collecting that money. It tends to be sort of a universal problem with law firms. So those are the things that I see as problems. I'd be curious to hear from the group if they've heard some others from the folks that they've worked with. So we've talked about niching. I want to go, everyone, I want to kind of get into this website search piece a little bit deeper. Everyone says, okay, I've got to build a website, and it can be very daunting to folks. And when you're talking about these content strategies, I mean, it's all rooted and home-based into a website. So how do you coach people in approaching that? Because that's hard, right? Making a website. I mean, you can have someone outsource it, you can insource it. How do you talk about that with people to get started with that? Is that part of your discussions with them?
Sure. I actually don't think that you need a website right away.
Really?
And
yeah, speak to that.
Absolutely.
All right, let me hear that.
So counterintuitive, a lot of similar to, you don't necessarily need to have a business card right away. You need to develop relationships. And developing the relationships by, like you said, in-person networking, being active virtually, whichever it is, I think is more important than a website. And I've actually done studies through different social media sites posing that question out there to people about, if someone doesn't have a website, will you still work with them? And many, many people will still work with you if they believe that you can help them solve their problem. That is the main thing that they're looking for. So in the beginning, I would rather you not have a website than one that doesn't do you justice and represent you well. That's the first thing.
That's astute. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's astute advice, because I've interacted with some of our LeanLaw accounting pro folks, and they show me their website, and I'm like, yikes. And it's not that they're not capable of making a website. I think it goes back to saying they don't know who they are yet professionally, and they don't know what they want to sell and what their value is, and they don't recognize the problem well enough to the attorney. And it's not that they're incapable. Right. They don't know their story yet.
That's part of why I think you ought to hold off on it until you gain more insight about who you work with and how you help them. And then start to develop it, because what's going to happen is that in the beginning, when you're first starting out, and what you think you do and what you think that you offer as far as the problem that you solve is going to be very different than after you've been working with attorneys for a while and you're really starting to understand why they come to you and why they hire you versus everybody else. And then once you have that insight, then go ahead and make the investment in building it. I believe that you're going to do better having someone else build it than you building it yourself, because when I go to websites and I look at them all the time, I can pretty much tell when someone's done it themselves versus when someone has had someone else do it for them that knows what they're doing. And with attorneys, they are looking for a certain level of professionalism. I would rather you have one or two very descriptive pages that engage them than maybe a 5-page website that doesn't really represent you well.
Yeah, and I think that what's important is the precursor step is, this value thing we keep talking about, but it's also how you work with attorneys. And what I mean by that is, what's your process? So that they can help understand that. And then secondly, how do you productize your work? And I always say there's 4 things that you folks can sell to a law firm. And again, it ranges a little on size. Number 1 is the bookkeeping reconciliation. And please, I beg of all of you to not get and spend all your time talking about you do accounts payable and accounts receivable and reconciliation. It's like we know that and we expect that, right? What we want to know is that A, you can do a reconciliation. B, that you can potentially do outsourced invoicing. That is a second revenue component. So law firms, as I mentioned, 3 reasons to hire you. They have something insourced and they want to outsource that. The third piece that you can do for law firms is advanced reporting. And the big one there is compensation. Some of it goes through some of the other lenses that lawyers want to look at in terms of timekeeper productivity or what's a good client or a bad client. But when you get to a firm that, as I said, is a micro firm and you have partnership agreements are complex, and every month they need to run very detailed compensation reports, and it has to be right and fairly transparent for the partnerships. And every year, those partnerships can potentially change as partners come in and partners go out. And there's revenue share on that. There's income based on actually working. So there's a lot of levers that go up and down in that. And the fourth piece that you can sell, I'll get to you in 1 second, is trust reconciliation and reporting. And Brandy is online. Hi, Brandy. She actually does this as a function for lawyers, that she actually helps them be compliant, which means she helps them do the paperwork. So there's and this is something lawyers have to do. They have to do it every month, which is reconcile their trust account. And they're not necessarily forced to report on it because some states don't require it. But if anything ever went awry, you're helping them be compliant is a huge value add. So that becomes part of the process of how you're saying, here's my value, I'm up market, and I understand your problems. You were going to say something, Lauren.
Yeah. If you want them to feel that you understand their problems, you have to talk about it in their language as opposed to yours. So they might not understand, or reconciliation might not be one of their words, or the billing part of it. They know they need to do billing, but they might not be saying it in the way that you're going to be saying it because you're in the accounting world all day long. All they know is they have people that owe them money and they don't know how to collect it. So that is what they're talking about. And what you want to do, especially when it comes to marketing and you're looking to bring them in, is you want to find the way to say it that they get it because they're saying it that way, as opposed to you using industry lingo. And that's true for your website also. I was just looking at a client's website earlier this week, and we were going through the homepage and what she does. She had, 40 different things that she has there as far as specialties. And I go, they're going to get overwhelmed with all that because it doesn't really mean that much to them. What I want her to do is to be able to differentiate herself by knowing exactly what that problem is that they solve. And I will tell you that the main problem that most attorneys going to have and why they want you to do it is that they need their taxes done because they don't want to end up with an audit or end up in jail or have fines. So, they need to get their taxes done. And I know that I'm simplifying it, but just kind of bear with me. That's, one of the main reasons that people do taxes is that they don't want to end up in jail or with fines. And the other thing to look at as far as the accounting part is that they don't know where their money's going. And they need someone to help them with that. Yep. Because they don't really care that much about the money piece themselves. They're not great business people necessarily. They need someone to really help them with that part of it and give them enough information without going into overwhelm so that they can make good business decisions to be able to move forward.
Yeah, there's three lenses or things that attorneys look through when they think about data, whether it's accounting data or other. How is my firm doing? And what Loren just spoke to is, a lot of them run their firms on gut instinct.
Mm-hmm.
They have this ongoing, they're smart people, and they've got this calculation in their head of WIP, work in progress, against overhead. And they kind of know that number, and they know they know how many hours they need to hit in a given week, in a given month. And it's not necessarily telling the whole story, but you have to overcome that. So the first thing they want to look at is, what is the lens of the firm? And that's an enormous opportunity to help them recognize where they're being efficient and where they're being inefficient. And many firms come to LeanLaw because they want to begin to become more efficient. They want to be LeanLaw firms. And that means trying to outsource or cut on human resources, other aspects of overhead. And that's kind of one of the questions that you ask when you start looking at someone's book is, you've got a lot of overhead. Can we help get from A to Z on that subject, and help them identify where they're spending their money. The second thing they're looking at is essentially their clients, and that's that monthly income. And in that, there's an opportunity to say, what's a good client and a bad client? And you can't help them quantify the subjective nature of, oh, I love this type of work, it's very meaningful to me. But you can tell them, hey, when you work with these types of clients, they don't pay you. And you send a lower wage. These guys pay you a lot. Why? And help them begin to identify what's a good client, what's a bad client, where they, how do they get more? And you're not necessarily their coach, but these are data points that are in the financials that can be brought out and just ask a question and have a conversation. And the third lens that lawyers are looking through is their staff, and not staff relative to receptions and whatnot, staff relative to billable hours. And the question becomes, are people being efficient? And is that a good staff member? Are they marking down a lot of their time? Is it, how are they billing their time? I mean, I've heard some crazy, crazy stories of people who, oh yeah, she never puts her time in. It's like, what? Like, how does that person stay employed in the organization? So that part of all of that and understanding that is beginning to develop that vernacular. As Loren said, I totally agree with you. You need to translate it all into their language, and you won't get it in day one. And that's what it means by going out. And I was saying, you can start to talk locally to attorneys and start just asking questions like, how do you define a good client and a bad client financially? Just because they just pay your bills on time and that's a good client? You can ask them about overhead, because most of them know their overhead number. So we're getting towards the end, and I want to make sure that we're going to answer any questions that the group has or speak to anything. So please, if there's something we're not speaking to or you have a specific question, I really encourage you to ask it through the chat or the question architecture, so that I can bring it into the conversation. So Loren, you posed a question to me. I want to find it. Here it is. It says, you talked about, is marketing as effective for introverts as it is for extroverts? So I want to stage that because I think, and I know some of these people on this list from interactions, and I feel like they're more introverted than extroverted. And it might be easier for someone like me to go, who's a classic extrovert, to go out and sell. But how do you speak to that question? Because I think it's hard for people to get up and sell and talk and do all these things that we say they're supposed to do.
Well, I first want to let you know that I am what you call an ambivert, which means that I'm on the cusp. Sometimes I can go towards extrovert, sometimes introvert. I lean more towards introvert actually than extrovert.
I am not. I'm classic extrovert. I think out loud. Everything.
Right. And to realize that whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can network. You simply have to do it in a way that works for your energy and your personality style. What I have found for extroverts is they go into a room, and the more people in the room, the more energized they are. Introverts, they go into a room, and the bigger the room, the more drained they're going to be, and the less time they can actually tolerate being there. That is the first thing. The second thing is that this is how you want to look at networking if you are an introvert. First of all, you can just network online. You don't actually have to go out and meet people. You can do virtual networking and set up one-to-one conversations with people and get better acquainted and do it all on Zoom or by phone. That is one thing. If you're an extremely shy person, is you can network virtually. The other thing to look at is when you are going to a meeting, you are probably going to do better at a meeting that has some structure to it than one that is happy hour at the bar and it's a little bit more organic where there's chit chat. So look for ones that have some structure to it. A lot of times those will be chamber meetings, B&I, business networking, international, or other types of network meetings will do that. Ones where they bring in a speaker will have a little bit of open networking where you just mingle, and then there'll be some structure to it as well. When you go to a networking event, do not go with the intention of needing to meet everybody. What you want to do is decide how many people you would like to meet, maybe 3 tops. And then when you meet people that you feel might be some type of alliance for you, whether they could be a potential client or maybe there's a potential referral partnership between the two of you, there's some synergy, then set up a coffee date with them later on. And the reason to go to these larger network meetings is so that you can then set up coffee dates and have one-to-one conversations with people. And that's going to be where you're more comfortable networking, is in this smaller one-to-one situation than this one-to-many. Oh, and by the way, introverts make fantastic speakers. And that is a way to network also, is to be there and you're being positioned as the expert.
Yeah, and you know, speaking might be, you can speak anywhere. Like, speaking doesn't have to be a big event. You know, you could set up a speaking event at your church or synagogue. You can set up a speaking event at local business social clubs. Everyone, all those entities are always looking for content. So you can initiate that. I mean, we always think speaking is like, I'm doing a big webinar and I got to attract all these people. You can do it very locally and very small, and you could talk to 5 people and it can be a fantastic conversation. And again, what speaking does in me, if you get the opportunity, whether you're doing it in a networking event or whether you're doing it in a more presentation mode, is that you begin to develop your story, the vernacular, how you want to communicate, and saying it over and over creates a fluidity, and that fluidity ultimately will derive into a perceived expertise.
And Jonathan, I want to say that when I first started business coaching in 2009, I had a fear of public speaking. It was one of those things, whether it was waiting my turn in a network meeting to share what I do, I would have an aerobic heartbeat without ever getting up from my seat. And the way that I was able to overcome that is I found a local Toastmasters group, and Toastmasters helps you learn how to speak in public, whether it's at network meetings or giving a 10-minute presentation. And by going to that for several months really helped me to shift how I look at public speaking and networking.
Yeah. So, okay, I want to get into the end, and I want to ask 2 more questions.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of different things. Can you bring it back to the beginning and at the high level help someone so they can, okay, I got to synthesize all of this into what should I do next? Meaning, you know, some people are further along. I kind of know by this thing. Some people are just getting started. But what should they do when they get off? I mean, after they, you know, go to the bathroom and get a sip of water or whatever they need to do. Like, what should they do to start?
Sure. What you want to do to start is first make a decision that you want to do a little bit more with attracting attorneys to your practice and developing that niche. So it starts with the decision and knowing who your ideal client is regarding attorneys, because as Jonathan mentioned, not all attorneys that have skin will be your ideal client. And then you want to choose 1 or maybe 2 ways of being able to connect with them. So this means you being proactive and going out to where they are, whether it's virtually on LinkedIn, in a LinkedIn group, or whether it's going to one of the association meetings, whether it is going to a conference, whether it's simply having a coffee date with somebody who you know that works with attorneys also. But what is it that you are willing to do? And just find 1 or 2 things that you're ready to get started doing and put those on your calendar, because I believe if they're not on your calendar, then it's an intention or something that you hope to eventually get to, but you're not fully committed yet. So put in your calendar, because if it's in your calendar and you carved out the time, you're more likely to actually follow through with it.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize one point. I think the very first step after you've made the decision about I want to niche into law, and maybe even done a little bit more research as to where in law you might want to niche, is to schedule 2 to 5 meetings with attorneys. They will make the time. Everyone in our community, in our networks, have someone who knows an attorney or knows attorneys, and they will make the time if you ask them nicely to say, listen, I'm thinking about niching. I want to understand better your problems. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I want to understand what you're doing. And it's really understanding how they, how it's their business model, how they earn their income, where the tension is, where the pain points are. And if you do that with 3 to 5 attorneys, you will walk away with a clear picture in your mind how you can begin to service those law clients and how you create the value. And I just can't emphasize that enough, that it's only when I had to sit in front of attorneys and sell LeanLaw did I begin to really understand how a law firm operates. And it's only when we committed to the LeanLaw Accounting Pro channel and I had to talk amongst the accounting community, understand what their needs were, did I really begin to comprehend this kind of niche of law and accounting. And it's because, people took the time, and sometimes I had to hustle a phone call. Other times people were happy to talk to me, and having done it now lots of times, I'm pretty well versed on the subject. I think one of the first easiest steps is to get a meeting, and it can be an online Zoom meeting if you meet someone on LinkedIn or some other place, or it can be coffee in your local thing. Last question from me, Loren, if someone were to work with you or engage you, what does success look like to them? I mean, what does that relationship look like, and what does success look like? What would they get from the process and a relationship with you or with you and your content?
Sure. With my clients, I want to be able to serve them in the way that suits them best. So what we do is we start off with having a value conversation and finding out what it is that they want to achieve, what they want their business to look like, where they're struggling, and how to be able to find those opportunities. What I focus on primarily with my clients is figuring out how to develop your niche, how to really be seen as that go-to person. And then the second step I look at is that system. What is the process or the steps that you go through to help your clients get a specific results? And being able to define that then influences what you put on your website, when you go to network meetings, how you start to differentiate yourself, because all experts have a system of going from problem to solution. After that, we look at how to be able to bundle your services together to really have it be packages as opposed to an a la carte menu. Yeah. The fourth part is how to do the pricing, so it's priced on value as opposed to time. And then the fifth part is finding where your audience is and how to really get out there to where they are, so they begin to recognize who you are and how you can help them. So those are the 5 steps that I typically help my clients with.
Well, okay, so next steps for the group. If you're not a LeanLaw Accounting Pro, please join. I put the link into the chat session. My email is fishman, FISHMAN, at myleanlaw, MYLEANLAW.com. If you had a question that we didn't answer, I'll reach out to you individually and answer it. But please join our community. What's happening now that we've committed to this for 6 to 9 months is that not only are we developing really good relationships with our communities, that you're helping influence our product. We're collaborating and helping each other learn and grow. And we've also, LeanLaw is launching, just as a result of this community, we're going to launch a new product. It's called Q Glue, And where LeanLaw is a standalone invoicing tool that integrates with QuickBooks, QGlue, which should launch late this quarter, early first quarter, is targeted to the other practice management platforms that we don't work with. And so if you have a customer that's in Clio, my case, Practice Panther, it will be a software application that brings the LeanLaw integration to QuickBooks and our smarts into those platforms. So that's a direct result as to listening to the accountants. I mean, don't tell anyone, but we don't do a lot of marketing to lawyers anymore. We want to talk to accountants. It's a much better relationship, and it's a much more win-win for all parties. So as a next step, join the LeanLaw Accounting Pro program. Please reach out to Loren and me individually if there's any questions that you have. Please get on Loren's mailing list. She sends out really smart and really pertinent newsletters and email information, and LeanLaw also aspires to do. Loren, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it, and we'd also like any feedback on this. If you liked it, you didn't like it, if you wanted to talk about something that we didn't talk about. This is the first time we've done this together, so we're always open to feedback. So Loren, good luck in your move next week, or this week, or whenever it is. And
2 more days.
good luck with that, and thank you all again for joining, and I'm going to end the session now. So take care, Loren.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.